Hello and welcome back to Copic in the Craft Room. Michelle Houghton here for another video tutorial using my Copic markers. I have a couple products to explain real quick before we get started coloring. The stamp I'm using today is by Dreamerland Crafts. This one is called Friends Will Never Let You Down, and it is just super sweet. These are rubber foam mounted stamps, so I've got that stamped. And I used a dye ink. This particular one is by Paper Tray. It's called Fine Linen. So it is kind of a creamy earth tone. And I've done that so that I can do some no-line coloring today. The other great new thing that I am playing in is one of the brand new Copic sketchbooks. So these sketchbooks are being made in-house at Imagination International. They are this great new, newer to us at least, paper that is coming straight out of Japan. It works beautifully with your Copic markers. It's actually a little bit lighter weight than our Express or a Nina cardstock. It blends beautifully. It is super smooth. It's a little bit of a cream color in that I'm not talking like true off-white, but like if you look at my Express paper against this, there's a little bit of a difference. The Express obviously is kind of a bright white. I don't know if I've got anything here. This has a brighter white to it. See if I can get close enough so you guys can see. That at least gives you a sense of that bright white versus kind of that just barely off-white. So that gives you at least a sense of that. But I love the weight, blends really smooth, holds the ink fairly tight. So I'm thrilled with the new line. Anyway, the sketchbooks themselves come in all these fun sizes. This one is a 5x7, but they come in long, narrow ones. They come in the bigger, kind of more standard sketchbook sizes as well, kind of a 9x12, 11x14, stuff like that. Now, because I am primarily using Copics in mine, I also added kind of this flap. Now, this doesn't come included. I've added this. And the reason for that is I am going to need to have something in between. And I could put any sort of sheet of paper in between. If I don't, my ink is going to show up on the next page. It'll bleed through the back of my page that I'm working on like normal. But remember how like your tabletop or paper that you're working on gets some ink on it no matter what. If I don't put something in between, I'm going to get my Copic ink on that next page. So what I did was kind of add a piece of kind of nice heavy cardstock. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. In fact, I'd recommend cheap because this is probably going to get changed every once in a while. And I attached it so I have it and it travels with the sketchbook. Isn't that slick? So I can kind of leave it on the page I'm working at, or it can kind of slide back here and it'll stick out. This little piece will stick out a little bit to accommodate the size of the sketchbook, but I'm not super concerned about that. If you want to see exactly how I did that on my sketchbook, I'm going to have that on my blog, which is scrapweaver.com. And so some little steps about how I added this little piece in my sketchbook, which I thought was quite clever. Anyway, we're going to do some coloring. This image, Copic markers, some fun different colors I don't use very often. And again, the stamp is by Dreamerland Crafts. Zooming in and coloring next. So I'm going to start with her skin, and I've got a YR with 4 zeros behind it, and that's what I'm starting with. I'm going right onto those kind of sepia lines. YR 00 is going to add the shading. I worked on one of these images before. This is YR 4 zeros, softening that up, and I do fight a little bit with where to put the shading on the shape of the faces this artist has created. A little R20 for the cheeks, and then I'm smoothing that out with my YR 00 and YR 4 zeros. YR 30 is basing the hair, and YR 31 is flicking, and I'm using the very tip of the brush nib. YR 24 is next. And I know this is super fast, but that's because this image is going to take a while to color. YR27 is next, again, way up on the tip of the nib, even fewer strokes to complete that that layer, and no blending. I did a T3 on the umbrella, and now I'm going down to those little pigs and doing an R20 for their base. Now I could do these guys one at a time, but I'm choosing to work all of them. RV42 is my mid-tone. I'm coming from their back side up and underside, and then their little back leg and their back ear gets a little touch in their little noses. RV93 is going to add some shading. This one has a lot more violet in it, so it's perfect to add that deepest shade, and then just a touch with the RV42 to blend it. BG72 on her little hair tie, and then BG70 on her dress. I use a little colorless blender because I thought about doing some polka dots, but that does not happen. BG72 though is going to start that shading. So I've got coming down that right side, a little bit around her arms, armpits, and then a little bit up that center to show the wave in the fabric. BG70 to soften that up, and then cleaning up the outer edge with some colorless blender. BG72 is going across the top of the umbrella, or the whole umbrella top. And it does take a little longer when it's no line coloring to hit those edges because you're being so cautious about those lines. You don't have a hard line. BG75 is next, and I'm starting with the shading right down the center of each section. I'm smoothing that out with BG72, and I am going to change where that kind of shading happens here in a minute, so kind of keep an eye on that. BG70 is, I'm going to try to lighten up the highlights. And right now I've got it coming down both edges. And I even do some colorless blender again to try to lighten that back up just a little bit so I have more of a distinct highlight. And now I'm really going to change that. I'm going to keep the highlight over the right side of each section and push that shadow down to the left and smooth it all out. T3 to hit those little umbrella pieces, and then Y11 on her boots, bright yellow boots. Y23 for mid-tone. And Y26 for the darkest areas, those deepest shadows. Soften that up with Y23 and Y11 going back. Colorless blender to pop that highlight a little bit and to clean up that dress one more time out on that right hip. And then I'm going to start on the sky, and I start with colorless blender, and then I flick B21 from the image outward onto the colorless blender. And I come back with the colorless blender one more time to soften, and I work all the way around the image, exchanging between colorless blender first, B21 next, then more colorless blender. And I can go back and forth as much as I need to. Sorry, I slip off the screen just a touch. Just working my way all the way around. I kind of create that horizon line. It's probably a little bit low for this image, but it's working. And T3 to kind of crispen up some of those highlights or shadows. E13 to hit some of the dots on the facial features. So I'm going to stop there. I'm pretty pleased with how it has turned out so far, but it just is a fun color day for me, working in my new sketchbook and playing with some no-line coloring. I think it's one of those things and skills that I continue to work on and get better at each time I do. And again, and I've said this in classes before too, but the more I can come back and do this exact same image again, the better it'll get each time I do it. So don't think that once you've stamped an image and tried it once, you're just going to be an expert at it. Coming back a second time, you'll have some knowledge. Even staying with the same stamp company to work over that type of image again, it's going to be helpful to do it multiple times. It's just going to give you more knowledge, more practice. So I really do appreciate, as always, you joining me this week at Copic in the Craft Room. If you had not had a chance to do so, please like our channel. We're shooting for 10,000 followers, and we're going to celebrate when we hit that number. If you enjoyed this video, like that as well, and then make sure to comment, because if you comment and ask questions or make suggestions for new videos, I will see that and make sure to let you know and answer questions as quickly as possible. Thank you for joining me this week, and again, you can also join me over at Copic in the Craft Room on Facebook for more coloring inspiration. Have a great, colorful week.